How are we this morning? Good. We're glad that you're here with us this morning. So I told you last week we were going to have a pop quiz. Okay, if you fail, then I'm going to figure out how to deal with that. I don't know. You have to wear something or something. I don't know what we'll do. But our vision is, do you remember? Oh, we're so close. We're getting there. We exist to connect people to Jesus Christ and each other. Say it with me. We exist to connect people to Jesus Christ and each other. The last 4 weeks or so, we have been unpacking this vision together, and you can go back. Those videos of those messages are on our website. Encourage you to go back if you missed any of these and check out what those have and what we have talked about thus far. We spent a couple weeks just unpacking that statement, what it looks like for us to connect people to Jesus Christ, and what does it look like for us to connect people to other believers as well. And then last week we began diving into one of the 5 areas that we feel very strongly we need to focus on in the coming season of ministry here at North. And so we spent last week talking about Sunday services, Sunday mornings, what we are doing right now. And so if you missed that, again, it's there on the website. We're going to continue on this morning, and we're going to dive into week number 2 of these 5 areas, and we're going to talk about this morning family ministry. We're going to talk about family ministry this morning. And I got to be honest, I'm super biased, and I'll just tell you, I love family ministry. I am passionate about family ministry. Families are so important to our church. It may, affect us a little bit that I have a family, and I have 4 children at home that seem to own this place every Sunday morning. So I am super passionate about family ministry and what that looks like, not just for the future of our church, but for our church now. And how families, yes, they impact our church down the road in the coming years, but they impact our church now in the present. Think about the book of Acts, if you will, with me. Think about what you know about the spread of the church in the first century. What took place was, as the apostles were going out and preaching, as the gospel was being spread, people were coming to a relationship with Jesus. People were surrendering their lives to Him, and that included families. It wasn't just people who didn't have kids. It was everybody. Their numbers grew, and that included families with kids as well. And so what did they do? Well, they got the Apostle John, and they handed off all the kids to John, and John was the first children's and student minister, right? No, that you can't find that anywhere, just in case you were wondering. That's not how things worked. What happened in the first century was that the family ultimately was responsible for developing and passing on faith in the lives of their kids. This was the normal way things worked in the first century. For us now, in 2019, our children's ministry that takes place during second service every week, we have, for the past few years, really honed in on what we are going to be about as a children's ministry, and we have really honed in on what we are going to do and not do. And I've talked about it before, and a lot of what I'm going to share with you this morning I've shared before as well, but we really embrace a philosophy of the color orange. It's children's ministry, so we got to make it really basic, right? We embrace the philosophy of orange philosophy, and this ultimately is the idea of combining 2 different influences in order to influence the coming generations for Christ. Now, if we can go back to first grade, right, and we can talk about our colors, then we know that the color orange is made up of what 2 colors? Red and yellow. Good. Great. Good job. Red and yellow combined together make orange. So if we look at the color red, it can represent the family. It can represent the heart, nurturing children towards God, showing the character and nature of God to kids. This is the primary responsibility of the family. Red, represented by red. God instituted the family thousands of years ago. And then we have the color yellow. This is going to represent for us the church. This is the light that's shining in the darkness for us. The purpose of the church is to shine the glory of God to everyone, to every generation, to shine like stars, as Paul said. The purpose of the church, the purpose of the capital C church, the church that's bigger than North Christian, the church that's bigger than our own one church here up on a hill, is to shine the light of Christ for people in a dark world. God instituted the church thousands of years after He instituted the family. And here's the reality. There's nothing deep or theological or any really even profound about the color orange or even this thinking behind it. Over decades of people who have worked in churches for many years, they have come together and they have honed in on what it takes to make a successful family ministry in a church. And we're going to unpack that a little bit this morning. And reality is there's nothing super special about the orange curriculum that we use. We use it here on a weekly basis, but honestly, it's just a tool for us. Like it's just a resource that we have. There's nothing super special about it. It's not like the only thing that we can use. We could use any material. We could write our own material, and it would be fine. It is just a tool that we use. But we grab a hold of the philosophy behind orange. That's what we grab a hold of. The philosophy and the reason behind what we do is more important, and that's what we want to talk about a little bit this morning. Why do we see this as important for us here at North Christian Church? We have these two influences. We have red and we have yellow, and we combine them together to make orange. But if we honestly look at it, like if we honestly look at the kind of the history of the church over the last several decades, if we're honestly looking at it, we can kind of realize that things have not been going great for us in nurturing faith in the lives of children and teenagers growing up, has it? Like the statistics are there. Numerous studies will say that nearly 70% of kids and teenagers that grow up in church, they will walk away from their faith when they graduate high school. That's a very real number and a very real statistic. And then of that 70%, only about half of them, within 10 years or so, will return back to church. Like, let that sink in for a minute. 70% of our kids, of our teenagers that grow up in the church, that spend their years growing up in the church, 70% of them will walk away from their church and ultimately from faith once they leave high school. And of that 70%, only about half of them will return within 10 years. And honestly, if you talk to this half of them, most of them are only returning because they started to have kids and they realize that they don't know what they're doing. You ever been there? We are not doing a good job. We're not doing a good job with our kids. We're not doing a good job with our families. And when I say we, understand what I mean. We as the church are not doing a good job, but we as the family are also not doing a good job in nurturing faith in our children's life. And so orange is the philosophy, it's the strategy that gets the family and the church working together to make stronger and better impact on families, specifically stronger and better impact on our kids and on our teenagers. Combining two different and individual things in order to make a greater impact. Now understand, and you guys know this, in our culture, we are not great at combining things that don't naturally just come together on their own, right? Like you watched what was on every TV channel on Tuesday night, didn't you? We're not great at coming together as a culture. We're not great at working together as a culture. But the reality is we have to do this. Like we have to take that step. And the impact of it can be huge in the lives of our families and in the lives of our kids and in the lives of our church. It's kind of like this. I don't know if you remember this or not, but for me, I remember the person, the place, and the song of my first dance with a girl. Do you remember? You remember the person, place, and song of your first dance? I was in 6th grade. Don't judge me. There's going to be multiple things that you're going to want to judge me on. I was a public school kid. Just go with me, okay? 6th grade, our school would let us go off of the school campus and do a Halloween party. And so we loaded up in a bus. We went out to somebody's house. We walked through this scary maze. Don't judge me, okay? We walked through this scary maze, and then we landed, and we ended up in the middle of this barn, and it was kind of open, and there was music playing. There's hay bales around the side, and we were supposed to just naturally dance as 6th graders. Right. Exactly. That was not working out. I had a fantastic teacher in 6th grade. One of them, his name was Mr. Lutzenheiser. A wonderful, fantastic individual. He loved kids. He was doing what he should have with his life. He took it upon himself to try and help the boys out and give us a little courage in order to dance with a pretty girl. Now, obviously, he cannot dance with one of the girls. That is a big no-no as a teacher. And so what he did is he found a broom in the corner of the barn there, and as the music is playing, he is out there, this big, goofy teacher guy, dancing with a broom, trying to get us all to break through the nerves that we had. I and other boys, nervous, sweaty, unsure of what we are supposed to do, 6th grade boys, slowly, one by one, got the small bit of courage, quickly followed by almost paralyzing fear, right, to approach a girl and say, can you, and ultimately they would know what we're asking and they would just walk out there with us, right? Like we couldn't even verbalize it sometimes. And we'd make our way to the dance floor. And if you remember your first dance, especially if you were around this age, you know that you don't have a clue what you're doing, right? Like you don't know how you're supposed to stand. You don't know where you're supposed to put your hands. You don't know how you're supposed to move. Are you supposed to look at this person? Are you supposed to awkwardly look around the room like you don't know what you're supposed to do? But little by little, you work your way out there and you work your way through this first dance. And so much of the 6th grade dance was made up of awkward boys and girls standing near each other, kind of swaying to music in the background, barely touching each other. But I can tell you what, it was driven by a desire to have a dance with each other. And I think for many of us, we can remember that. I can remember the who, the where, and the what song it was for that very first dance that I had in 6th grade. Orange, the strategy behind Orange, if we set aside everything else that we use, the curriculum or the tools that we use, the idea and the strategy behind Orange is to get two things that don't naturally go together to dance with each other. The idea behind Orange is to get these two influences to better impact a child's life together rather than by themselves. And so this morning I want to unpack with us together what this looks like, what this strategy, what this idea looks like for us. And so let's start with yellow. Let's start with yellow, with the church, with the light of the world because of Christ. Read this with me, Revelation chapter 1, verse 20. The secret of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand and the 7 gold lampstands is this. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. Throughout Scripture, and throughout the New Testament especially, the church is referred to as the light in the world. And the church is even equated to here as the lampstand. It's equated to the lampstand. Think back to the book of Exodus. Inside of the tabernacle, inside of the holy place, surrounded by curtains, there are 3 things inside of this place. There's the showbread, the altar of incense, and the lampstand. And in that place, the lampstand is the only source of light in that very dark place. And what John is doing here in Revelation is he's saying that the church is the lampstand now. The church is the light into the darkness. The church points to the glory of God in its culture. Acts chapter 2, we've been there for the past several weeks off and on. As the first church is being described in Acts chapter 2, they are devoted to what? To teaching, to breaking of bread, to prayer, to fellowship. And the first church grew and spread because they were a light in the darkness that was around them. They were a light in the darkness around them. And so, question, how well has the church done in the last 2,000 years? Like if we look back at the history of just the last 2,000 years, how well has the church done? Well, I think we can look back at specific things and we can say, well, the church has kind of blown it in a few different areas, right? Like the church has not done great. But in the midst of the last 2,000 years, in the midst of persecutions, in the midst of false doctrines, in the midst of false teachers, in the midst of individuals trying to derail everything, in the midst of churches going out and doing something that is very anti-church, in the midst of all that in the past 2,000 years, the church still continues to pass on faith to the next generation. The church still continues to nurture faith in the lives of kids that grow up and carry on the mission of the church. And so we as a church, North Christian Church, consider this a huge responsibility. We take this very seriously for us. The role of passing on faith to the next generation is serious. It is important. And I can tell you that there is a group of people that every second service, they give of their time, they give of their resources, they give of their gifts and abilities, and they go down and they do this with our kids every single week. And understand, it's not babysitting. Like, it's well established that dropping your kids off in our children's ministry, they're not just going to get played with the whole time. This is not just child care. They are devoted to cultivating faith in the lives of children, whatever's appropriate for them at that specific age. We are committed to this as a church. But understand, and you know, there is another influence in the lives of children, right? And in fact, I would say there is a greater influence in the lives of children, and that is the yellow. That's the red. That's the family. That's the heart. The heart that connects us as individuals. God instituted the family to impress upon children and to show and act out what it means to follow Jesus. A couple passages for us this morning. Deuteronomy chapter 6. We've talked about this many times. Starting in verse 4. It says this, "Listen, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. These words I am giving you today are to be on your heart. Repeat them to your children. Talk about them when you sit in your house and when you walk along the road and when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand and let them be a symbol on your forehead. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." Before the church was instituted in the New Testament, before the church was instituted, God designed the family to pass on faith to the next generations. How? By talking about it. By living it out in their daily lives. By talking about it when they wake up. By talking about it when we walk down the road, when we go to sleep, when we eat our meals together. When you are living your life, the things of God should be on your lips and on your minds. Families talk about and show kids how to live a life of following God together. Psalms chapter 78, starting in verse 4. "We must not hide from them, or from their children, but must tell a future generation the praises of the Lord, His might, and the wonderful works He has performed. He established a testimony in Jacob and set up a law in Israel, which He commanded our fathers to teach to their children, so that a future generation, children yet to be born, might know. They were to rise and tell their children so that they might put their confidence in God and not forget God's works, but keep His commands." We are not to hide from our kids, from our children, but tell them about who God is and show them about who God is in their lives. The family is the place where faith is nurtured and passed on so that they can pass it on later on in their life to their kids. This has been the role of the family since the beginning of time. And if you really look at it, families are the place where you have the most influence into a child's life, isn't it? I mean, if we think about it in terms of weeks, 52 weeks in a year, I think is right. My Nebraska education is paying off here this morning. 52 weeks in a year. You can laugh at that. We know that knowledge is spelled with an N. Good. You're still with me. 52 weeks in a year, if you put it just in terms of weeks, from birth until age 18, there are 936 weeks that we have with children. From birth until they reach 18, which is kind of the accepted age that they are beginning to go out on their own, they go off to college, whatever the future may be for them, 936 weeks is not a lot of weeks in the lives of children, and many of you know that. And I have not heard one person, as their kids are leaving their house and they're becoming empty nesters, I've never heard one person stand up and say, man, I can't wait until my kids get out of the house. Like, I can't wait until this is all over. I've never once heard people upset that their kids are finally leaving the house. It's always, it went by so fast. It's always, I didn't have enough time with my kids. 936 weeks from the time they're born until they are 18 years old. 936 weeks to cultivate a child's relationship with Christ. And if your child is 9 years old, if you just cut it down the middle, they're halfway done with this. 468 weeks left. That's not a lot of weeks. My daughter next week will turn 8 years old. She's nearing the halfway mark. We don't have a lot of time with our kids anymore. Before they move out, they move on. This time goes by so fast. And so, put it in perspective of your family, if you will. If you come to church and you spend an hour here, say, a week, and you come and you drop your kids off in children's ministry, we get about an hour or so with them a week, and then they go back with the family and go on with their lives. On average, we get about 50 or so weeks a year with a fairly committed family and their kids. I think at best we get about 50 hours a week with kids. 50 hours, not 50 hours a week, 50 hours a year. We get 50 hours a year, 1 hour a week for about 50 weeks in order to share Christ with them, to shine the light of Christ with them. And that doesn't include weeks where families are gone. Either somebody is sick or they're out on vacation or something else is going on. 50 hours a year is not very many hours for the church to be the sole disciple maker in the lives of a child. Like, this should be terrifying for us when we realize as parents the sole responsibility for my child's growth and the nurturing of faith in my child's life is not a church. It's me. Even in the position that I'm in, even in doing the work that I do on a daily basis, this can be a terrifying thing sometimes. It is my responsibility alone. It is my responsibility alone to pass on faith to my children, and I feel at times very inadequate to this task. Scripturally, if we look at it, there's not a lot of great examples of parents throughout Scripture, right? Like, you can't point to a lot of examples in Scripture and go, they knocked it out of the park in parenting their kids. Now, there are a lot of parenting books that are out there, and in fact, that may be the problem. There are a ton of parenting books out there, and it can be even overwhelming for people just to look at the scope of information that is out there telling them, parent this way, or do it this way, or this is how you raise your kids this way. And yet with all that, and with the pressure of feeling that it is my responsibility, even if I feel inadequate, that doesn't take away the responsibility. It is still my responsibility. It's my responsibility alone to raise and nurture faith in my kids. And so we as a church, as North Christian Church, as we are pushing the vision of connecting people to Jesus Christ and each other, we want to partner with parents in this quest. We want to partner with parents in this to nurture and pass on faith to the next generation. And what many of you in your lifetime have seen is, over the last several decades, the rise of specialized ministry, right? Like, it used to be, and I know I can't get away with this in this group, but I'm going to try it anyway. Back in the day, right? Thank you. Back in the day, it used to be the minister, and he kind of did everything, right? He got up here and he preached, and maybe even he led music, and he was also involved in some level in leading the programs for the kids and the teens, and he was kind of out there just doing everything. But what we saw back in the 80s was that children's and youth ministries and children's and youth ministers started to rise up and become a common thing in churches. And along with that rise was bad and incorrect ideas and mindsets about the church's role and the family's role in nurturing faith in children's lives. The idea that the church substitutes for the family rose. The idea that what happens in church is more important than at home rose. The idea that it's okay for families to delegate responsibility and delegate discipleship to the church rose. And so if you buy into this, understand what I am saying. Most of the time, when you delegate discipleship to somebody, to a youth minister or a children's minister in your church, when you decide to delegate that spiritual responsibility and discipleship to the church, what you're doing is delegating it to a 22-year-old single guy who has very little experience with actually discipling kids. And when it doesn't work, what do? We get angry at the church. We get angry at the church because our kids didn't grow up and they didn't develop and they weren't discipled the way that we think they should be as parents. And many of you know I grew up here. I've spent the last 8 or 9 years here or so, and about 6 of those years I spent in student ministry here. I was the guy that took your kids for an hour and a half or so once a week and was working with them. I can tell you story after story of parents that came up to me upset because their kids were not growing spiritually the way that they thought that they should as parents. And I can tell you story after story and conversation after conversation of this happening because parents wanted to drop kids off with me for an hour and a half a week and have them grow up to be a stronger, better Christian than they were as parents. All the while at home, parents were pushing everything else other than discipleship with their kids. They are pushing things like school and future education and social lives and sports and getting into the right college. And everything else is more important to them than nurturing faith in the lives of their kids. And we wonder why our kids are not growing up and being spiritually mature adults. It's because our focus is in the wrong place. And so parents, we have to abandon this idea that church is completely to blame here. Parents, I'm included in this, we have to abandon the idea that the church is the sole discipler in our kids' lives. Parents have the primary responsibility for our children. And if you want to change the stats, if you want to change the 70% walking away from church after they graduate high school, parents, we need to accept and take on this responsibility. But church is not totally out of it either. Like church is not totally without blame either. Historically, the church, to its fault, has elevated the small amount of hours that we get with kids too high. Historically, the church, without saying it, has acted as though it is more important than the family. And without saying it, has acted like they are the experts. And so the church says things like, well, the church wants to supplement what's taking place at home, but ultimately what they're saying is the church is at least equal to what is taking place at home. And it looks good and it sounds good, but it absolutely fails in the lives of our kids. What happens is that we try to achieve, as families, balance between our family lives and our church lives, and the church ends up over-programming children and students to the place it becomes unrealistic for families to be at everything. Families believe that they have to attend every event along with being there every Sunday. They can't miss a Sunday, they can't miss Sunday school, they can't miss other events, and they have to try and check a box. And then when we over-program, a lot of times every time that we get together, what we do is we take the family that we say that we're for and we split them up, and we send the kids to one area and we send the adults to a different area, and we try and do our thing with them separate. Now, I understand there are times that it's appropriate for kids and adults to be in different places, but not always. But not always. The Orange strategy works to synchronize the two influences in a child's life. What happens at home is more important than what happens here in a child's life. When we're looking at a child's spiritual development, when we're looking at nurturing faith in a child's life, what happens at home is more important and more impactful than what happens here. We come here, we're here teaching, we break bread, we fellowship together, and all of this is important, all of this has value, but what happens outside these walls are more important than what happens inside these walls. We come here to refill, to be encouraged, to be challenged, and then we go out and we shine a light into a dark world. What happens outside is more important than what happens inside. Partnering together with parents means that we work hard together for the benefit and for the lives of our kids. And so we give tools to help parents disciple and pass on faith to their kids. We see something different because of the families that make up this church. We see growth take place because families are discipling their kids, not just the church. And we work hard to work with parents in order to give them tools in order to do this themselves, to be another voice into the lives of our children. And I can tell you firsthand the impact that this has had on my kids. Just last week, as our kids are in the midst of studying serving in children's ministry, last week we come home and I am usually exhausted by the time we get home, and we sit down and I'm usually taking a nap. And last week on Sunday afternoon, Kimmy fell asleep on the couch taking a nap with one of the kids, and I'm on the recliner about half asleep, and I hear something going on in the kitchen, and that's always a bad sign. And so I kind of get myself woke up fully, and I call them in, and I'm like, what are you guys doing? And my two oldest, Hannah and Brecken, they say, well, we're doing dishes for you. That's never happened before. I don't know this in my house, but that's never taken place. They say, well, we're doing dishes for you. We want to just help out. And I'm like, nervously like, okay, well, we'll see how this goes. And so I kind of let myself doze off a little bit, and about 20 minutes later, I kind of wake up again, and there's some rustling around in the kitchen again. Again, it's a bad sign. I just automatically am nervous about this. And I look out there, and they are folding laundry in our kitchen, and they push this laundry basket out of laundry that they had folded together. And I'm like, well, why are you guys doing this? And they're like, well, we just want to serve. And then I let myself doze off again, and I wake up to the vacuum cleaner going on in our other living room. And Hannah has a rag, and she's wiping things down in the house. We need people. I need people. My family needs people who are committed to kids that are speaking the same truth into their lives. We need the church. Children need parents that help them advance in their relationship with God, and parents need a church that is coming alongside them, that is encouraging them, that is supporting them to be the spiritual leaders in their families. Families and children and kids are the future of our church, yes. I will give you that, but they are also the church now. They are the church now. Kids, teens, young adults are the church now, and this is too important of a task for us to fail at. This is too important of a task for us to keep missing at. We can have ministry that is there for Christian adults that is good and self-sustaining, but if we miss ministering to our kids and to our teenagers, then we are missing what is so important for our church. We need to work together, and we need a church and a family that reflects the light of Christ in every child's life that then goes out and reflects it into the world. And so this morning I want to put a bug in your ear about 3 dates that are coming up here that our children's ministry team has been working on and will continue for the next few months. The first one is this March 15th, if you want to write this down. All of these, more information will come in the next few weeks and months. March 15th, we're going to have a one-night marriage event. And this is for everyone. If you are married, if you ever think you're going to be married, if you were once married and you're not anymore, or whatever the case may be, you are welcome to come to this one-night marriage event. It is totally free, which I know is hard to imagine, but there will be a meal, there will be interactive teaching, and specifically teaching on the impact of technology in our marriage. Don't know if that is a struggle for anybody or not. Sure is for us. Meal, interactive teaching, childcare, and meal, and everything is totally free. Sign-ups will be coming out here in the next couple weeks. About a month after that, April 12th, we're going to provide a date night. We've done this in the past. We're going to do it again in April. We want to provide free childcare for you and your spouse so you can go out and you can have a date together. I know that is a difficult thing sometimes, to find somebody to watch the kids even for a couple hours so you can grab a cup of coffee. We provide conversation starters and conversation points if you choose to use them. If you don't, just throw them in the trash. We don't even care. We want to give you plenty of time to go out and spend time with your spouse and grow together. And then number 3, June 10th through 14th is VBS. The theme this year is Roar. Life is wild, God is good. VBS has been a time where we get many people who come in from the community that we have never met before, and we want to continue to grow that as well. All 3 of these, you don't have to be a young family, you don't have to be young married or with kids. You can, except for maybe VBS. We kind of do draw the line at 6th grade for that, except we do let Jerry come, so I don't know what that means. Um, all of these are for anybody who wants to be involved with them. We are committed to family ministry here. We are committed to making it a priority to partner with families in order to nourish faith in children's lives. Church, we invite you to join us with that. Let's pray. Father, I'm so thankful, again, just for this church, and I'm thankful for the opportunities that we get to be here together and that we get to worship you and grow together. And I pray this morning as we are looking at families and children and teenagers that this would be a priority for us, that we would be focused on nurturing the relationship that kids have with you, and that would be at the forefront of our minds and our actions and our thoughts. Father, thank you for this responsibility that we have in order to do this in the lives of kids. Let us not take that for granted, and let us not skip over that or take it lightly. And so, Father, continue to lead us and guide us as we continue to pursue after you. It is in your Son Jesus' name that I pray. Amen.